commemorate this significant occasion, the launch of the Managerial and Societal Costing Framework by the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board under the patronage of CMA Sri Lanka. You will notice that the framework has a dual impetus, and that is something that will be very much in focus in today's proceedings. This intervention is timely, as we are beset now by repeated calls for reinvention, renewal, new paradigms in how we do business, not only to survive, but to thrive in the wake of a pandemic, the impact of which has lasted far, far longer than we initially expected when we set out. Multitudes of fora populate the space dedicated purely to the subject of how and what can be done. For surely, the why is obvious. Change we must when old ways no longer bear fruit. Resistance is futile. But as we change, we must ensure that that change is for the good, not just of a select few, but of the many. What role then can management accounting play? It is at the heart of business decision-making and has the power to enact reforms in businesses in an unprecedented fashion today. But the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board recognizes a greater responsibility, that of ensuring that as a nation, we are prepared and our businesses are equipped to bring about the renewal that we keep discussing. This thrust is not new for CMA Sri Lanka. The body was established with the aim of creating opportunities, but this new initiative by the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board aims to create a holistic ecosystem which compels organizations to consider strategically not only the elements that lead to competitiveness in the global marketplace, but how they can impact the people of our country. We are honored to have several guests with us today who will bring their experience to bear from across the globe and share their thoughts. But we begin, as is customary, with some words of welcome from the founder president of CMA Sri Lanka, who has, as you are aware, always been passionate about embracing the potential of business to change lives, and who will no doubt issue a strong call to action as he sets the tone. Professor Lakshman R. Vatavada.
Good evening, and of course, good morning to those from USA. Let me welcome you to the launch of the CMA Sri Lanka Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, Managerial and Societal Costing Framework. I think this is a very, very opportune time for us to launch this program. And we are also very happy that this evening we have as our chief guest the Honorable Ajit Niwat Cabral, the new governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. And we wish to congratulate him not only on achieving this new post, but also on the elevation to a cabinet rank, bringing great honor to the accounting profession. As you know, he's a past president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, and of course, the South Asian Federation of Accountants. I'm very happy, Honorable Governor, to tell you that we are having very many friends from our South Asian region here, and they will really appreciate and congratulate you on this great achievement as governor, as well as achieving cabinet status, which I think is very, very recognition that has been given not only to the governor of the central bank, but also to the accounting profession. So we have also a very, very distinguished gathering here today. We have as a special guest the honor the president of the South Asian Federation of Accountants, Mr. Delva Hussain. Then we have our keynote speaker, Mr. A.N. Raman, who's also on the advisory council of CMA Sri Lanka. Our guest of honor, Professor Ho Yu Ki, another key member of our CMA advisory council. Dr. F. Lawson from the USA, formerly from the Institute of Management Accountants of USA. Gary Corkins, of course, who's been here, he's been doing a record 8 lectures on performance management. We are very happy that he's here with us. Mr. Biswarup Basu, who's the president of the Institute of Cost Accountants of Sri Lanka. And I must say, in 2019, when we launched the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, and on that auspicious occasion, we signed a MOU with the Institute of Cost Accountants of Sri Lanka, and it is indeed a great honor to have you with us. Then we have Mr. Siaul Haq from the Institute of Management Accountants of Pakistan, Mr. Abu Bakar Siddiqui, the President of the Institute of Management Accountants of Bangladesh, and of course our own Manil Jayasinghe, President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, Mr. B.B. Goel, a former advisor on cost and management accounting to the government of India. Then we have our Vice President, Vice President of SAFA, Mr. Hennayaka Bandara. Then the Chairman, Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, Mr. Mahendra Jayasekara. The committee members of the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, the members of CMA, council members of CMA, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a very, very historic occasion, as I told you, that today we are launching one of the most important items in the what has happened to the accounting profession, because we know that in 1959 the chartered accountants were there and they have been playing a very major role. Then in 2009, where we came into being, and then the government also accepted us by setting up the us by an act of parliament. So this is indeed a very, very historic occasion, because one of our objectives was to have the cost and accounting standards in place. So we have now done the framework, and I think the launch of the managerial and societal costing framework will provide cost accounting practices to achieve global competitiveness and benefit to society to obtain goods and services at affordable prices. So this is not only the industry and commerce, but also the society that will benefit. Let me thank the chairman and members and also our advisors of the Cost and Management Accounting Standard Board for the great work that we have done. I'm happy that both the chairman and also one of our senior members, Mr. Tiral Roach, is here with us today, and they have been assisted by our advisors, Mr. A.N. Raman, who has played a major role. He will be giving the keynote address, and I'm sure that he will be able to tell you more of the importance of the formation of the managerial and societal costing framework. And also this also has great relevance to government. And in this respect, I must thank another advisor to our committee, Mr. B.B. Goel, who was a former advisor on cost and management accounting to the government of India. So I think a lot of experience would help us in our formulation of the standards and also helping the regulators in carrying out their job. In Sri Lanka, costing is of great importance to business, both in domestic production as well as in imports and exports. We have heard many instances where the local industries have said that as a result of the free trade agreements, they have suffered as goods have been dumped to in the market from the foreign countries. Then with this framework that we have, which will be putting into place, they will be able to make use of the cost and management accountants to ensure that the correct price is there in these imported goods. I think this is a very, very big feature. I know that in countries such as India, they are implementing this in a very big way, and any goods that are underpriced will not be able to the country and defeat the local industry. So that's something that is of great importance to us. Then we also have the various cost and management accounting techniques. Now, this will also enhance and add to the financial management accounting profession, where we could analyze, and I'm sure we have our experts, both Ralph Lawson and Gary Hawkins, that they will tell you more about the importance as to how the role of the management accountant. Then, of course, we will have to play a very, very important role that this body that has been formed, the framework, will play in the economy of this country. Because it has to be applied in all aspects of the economy, so that managerial and societal costing framework will be of great importance to the country. The standards could be relied on even today. I think we are facing major problems on costing and pricing, but these could be all worked out in a fitting manner, in a proper manner, with the professionals coming in, and also it will be more transparent. People will know how this is being done, and also the industries and service sector will know what are the cost cutting they should do in order to be competitive. So that's some of the very, very important areas. Today, many businesses are having problems because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, initially they were unable to obtain funding, but I am sure that our Honorable Governor from the Central Bank, they have done quite a lot. And now in his present role, that he will be able to play a major role in uplifting our economy, and that he will make use of this managerial and costing framework that we are going to do both for the industry, commerce and government, to help the government. The other important thing, of course, is liquidity, and connected with, of course, is one has to be profitable. And even in the liquidity, where combined, the costing management accounting profession will be able to play a major role. So I'm once again, I wish to thank all our invitees, especially the governor, because I know that he is quite busy. But when I invited him, he said that this is of great importance, and especially to the economy of this country, and the COVID-19 pandemic that has taken place, and definitely that this cost and management accounting framework that we are launching would be great importance. So once again, let me thank everyone, welcome everyone, and also thank them for the contribution and also for attending our function today, and that this will be a great boost, and we have very many more things to do once the framework is there, the standards have to put in place, and that we will be able to accelerate it for the benefit of the industry, services, and of course society. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vatavada, for giving us an inkling of the rationale behind today's launch of the framework. We will hear more, because we now hear from Mr. Mahendra Jayasekara, who, as the Managing Director of Lanka Tiles PLC, needs no introduction, but it is under his aegis as the Chairman of the CMA Sri Lanka Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board that we launched the framework today. Mr. Jayasekara, welcome, and we await your valuable input.
Thank you. Good evening and good morning to those who are joining from the USA. Our chief guest this evening, Honorable Ajit Niwad Cabral, Governor, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Professor Lakshman R. Vatavada, Founder, President, CMA Sri Lanka, guests of honor and distinguished invitees. I am extremely happy to have this opportunity to address you all at the launch of CMA Sri Lanka Managerial and Societal Costing Framework Exposure Draft, formulated by the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board of Sri Lanka. When I was first asked to take up the chairman of this board by Professor Vatavada, almost I think that is 3 years ago, I myself was unsure as to what we expected to achieve. We all know and accept the financial accounting standards, but I had my doubts of needing managerial and societal costing standards. However, over time I began to realize the disadvantages we face as industries and also as citizens of this country by not having managerial and societal costing standards. If, with your permission, I may speak of the importance of having managerial and societal cost accounting standards, people are often unaware of the cost incurred by the enterprises in providing goods and services. Governments in providing subsidized goods and services, or even organizations selling loss leaders, should ensure that these goods and services are produced at an optimal cost. Therefore, it is paramount to have uniformly accepted standard mechanism to ensure that cost of manufacturing goods and services are properly captured. All commercial ventures that operate in a market-driven economy desire success when producing goods and services. These factors of production used to produce goods and services are interwoven to achieve success. And it is only continuous success that leads to sustained economic growth, that we all know. Unfortunately, for us all, these factors of production are scarce in supply, that we all know. It makes it all the more important that these scarce resources are used optimally. Limitation of resources is what we struggle with on a daily basis when managing a home, a company, or even a country. In Sri Lanka, the structure of economy is such that state plays a bigger role in the country's main economic activities than in developed countries. Almost all our key economic sectors, such as health, education, water, electricity, gas, petroleum, railways, airlines, and even seaports, lie in the hands of the state. It is these very services that serve as the bloodline of Sri Lankan industry. Market-driven enterprises often complain of high intermediation cost of these services that hamper growth. Therefore, it is incumbent upon the state to ensure these goods and services are produced at the right cost without being a burden to the society. For these sectors to be sustainable, products and services should be offered to consumers with reasonable margins, unless it is absolutely necessary to provide subsidies. I stress the word reasonable margin because, as a Buddhist, I know even Buddha, for your information, in Papanika Sutta, a discourse on how to be rich and happy in Anguttara Nikaya, says that for business success, it should sell goods and services at a price with a reasonable margin. It is only then can you secure your position in the marketplace and even minimize the threat of new entry. Even after 2,500 years of Buddha's parinirvana, we see this to be true when we look to benchmark and follow standards of successful companies. It is important to produce at the right cost and maintain reasonable margins. Successful companies are those that drive cost efficiencies to a level that others find difficult to emulate. In Sri Lanka, the general public is not aware of actual cost of water, electricity, railway, postal services, etc., simply because, as we believe, the cost records are not properly maintained or published. Managerial and societal costing ensures people see the full cost, and only then are they able to understand what is value adding and eliminate non-value adding costs. People need to be educated on the fact that we need to pay an economic price for what we consume. One of the issues the governments that are trapped in continuous budget deficit face is that they try to provide goods and services at heavily subsidized prices, ignoring long-term economic realities. This is a heavy burden on any economy. I am sure that these practices will be reviewed by all concerned only if they fully realize the cost incurred in production of these goods and services. However, this is not to say by any means that all social safety nets be removed in the name of costing standards. I am not saying that. Not all expenditure incurred may be relevant, but there can also be costs that are incurred but not considered in costing goods and services, such as external costs. These need to be captured accurately. Proper cost records will reveal costs that do not add value. Only if we eliminate non-value adding costs, we can expect people to pay the right price for the product or the service they consume. When an economy is under stress, it tends to create inflationary pressure. In order to justify these price increases, inflationary pressures, suppliers, be they public or private, should maintain proper cost records. Only if cost records are maintained properly, it will add pressure on the management of enterprises to control costs and minimize or even eliminate waste. Managerial and societal costing framework exposure draft we are unveiling today will aim to ensure uniformity in identifying and treating costs across all sectors. I am also happy to say that this initiative will allow producers of goods and services to compare and contrast the extent of value addition they achieve. I am glad to see our first milestone completed by launching the Managerial and Societal Costing Framework Exposure Draft. It took us 2 long years to complete this. CMA Sri Lanka Cost and Management Accounting Standard Board, which I had the honor and the privilege of chairing as the first chairman, did not do this alone. We received technical input from India as well as Canada. I would like to specially thank Mr. A.N. Raman and Mr. B.B. Goyal. Special thank you to two of you for their time and advice in making this entire project a success. This journey does not end here. We have a long road ahead of us. Undoubtedly, it will be challenging. This draft will be made public for debate and feedback from the private as well as the state sectors. The final document will be implemented, and hopefully it will be equally endorsed by both sectors. The private sector will not have many obstacles as they will see this process as the proper, ethical and sustainable way of doing business. With regard to the government sector, we are mindful of the fact that this sector will have to balance economic priorities with political realities. The government institutions should see that the results or benefits of this process will outweigh the challenges faced in changing their existing processes. I don't wish to speak at length, but however, in conclusion, I must say, we hope you all realize the importance of driving this framework and assist us thereafter in the formulation and issuance of managerial and societal cost accounting standards in the near future. That will be a significant project in the economic context of Sri Lanka. Finally, I thank all of you for this valuable opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Jayasekara, for those far-reaching remarks encompassing the philosophy as well as the practice. Ensuring a holistic view is, as Mr. Jayasekara noted, vital. And so we are pleased to be able to observe the bigger picture in the keynote address, which we have now. Having played a key role, as we heard, in the formation of the framework, our keynote speaker is a member of the CMA Sri Lanka Advisory Council, a past president of SAFA, a past council member of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, a former member of the FMAC and PAIB committees of IFAC. Mr. A.N. Raman, we are honored to have you here and we hand the proceedings over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Can I have the presentation put on the screen? Fine. Thank you so much. Honorable Governor, Central Bank, Sri Lanka, Niwat Cabral, sir, who is a very good friend of us, Professor Lakshman Vatawala, Chairman of the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, Mahendra, dignitaries from all over the world, and particularly the current president of SAFA, and my good professional colleagues from USA and Singapore. So without much loss of time, let me proceed with presenting the technical backbone of this cost and management accounting framework. As rightly said by Chairman, when we debated sometimes back, maybe 1.5 years back, how can we come up with a visionary document? How can we give to ourselves a roadmap for supporting the managerial requirements of the state as well as the individual enterprises, we did a lot of analysis. So what you see on the screen is the distilled view of those extensive discussions. The sum and substance of the whole thing is we have entity level players, which means at an enterprise level, who need to compete in a Sri Lankan economy as well as a global economy to carve out a competitive niche for themselves. So for them, there is a differentiated set of costing information. We also have the government, which is charged with a major responsibility of making life cool, calm, and affordable supply of essential goods and services to the common man. So it looked like as if they are diverse. Initially, we debated can there be a common framework. Then finally, we realized that what unites them both is a nation's commitment towards the progress of the sustainable development goals. So once this thought came to us, it was very clear to us that we can come up with a framework which need not tightly partition the managerial requirement of the enterprises and the costing requirements of the government, but yet we can do a wonderful striking of the balance and lay down a structure which will enable the Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka to come up with the resources. So this framework which you are going to see now is in essence a clarity which emerged in the discussions of the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, that we need to move towards this sort of framework. Next slide. So here, what exactly we felt, let us go a little bit into minor level details. We said there are two different key players for whom the costing information requirement will be different. Let us look at the firm level strokes. As we say, different strokes, different players, but all of them need to tune up to a single tune of sustainable development goals. So how do we do that? We need an enterprise level or a firm level stroking where today the Sri Lankan enterprises either producing goods or services need to have a vision and a strategy for green products or services. Towards that, they need to have green practices, and in this context, achieve the customer delight through a competitive pricing and achieve that through a resilient cost structure so that the profitability, the financial sustainability of the firm is not jeopardized. So this is exactly where the DNA of the managerial costing we could observe that very clearly the Sri Lankan firms need this sort of hand-holding, which has to be given to them as they move towards a global environment, particularly the post-pandemic era. And what about the government strokes? The government is committed to the environmental protection, the social health, trouble-free supply of essential goods and services at an affordable price, a reasonable quality of life, and a sustainable environment to the business which help them in doing this. So in this context, it's very important, as Chairman Mahendra said, government will be taking decisions relating to understanding the cost structure of water like electricity or the basic essential goods and services, which cannot be on a cost plus pricing. But at the same time, it cannot be done in such a way you issue a fiat to the firms that you need to supply electricity at this rate only or run the railways at this rate only. There has to be a very good understanding of the cost structure of providing such common man services, really analyze that and come up with a strategy. How do I manage that? Because the last bullet point, the sustainable environment to the business cannot be compromised. The business cannot be forced to supply goods at an affordable price, but on its own, the sustainability, it's not there. So the government has to take care of this affordable pricing of the essentials. And in case it is directing the enterprises to do an affordable pricing, how it also balances it with the individual firm's sustainability. This we called as a different strokes, an enterprise level stroke and a government level stroke. Now, having gained this clarity, next slide, please. Having gained this clarity, we then turned down and looked how globally the cost management practices or the cost information practices evolved in terms of application. We took a Darwinian view of this. In fact, at this point of time, I should record my appreciation for the wonderful work done by Professor Robert Kaplan of Harvard Business School, who almost 30-40 years back extensively documented how the costing as a framework evolved over a period of time depending on the basic drivers in the society. So you can see at the bottom of this picture, it all started in the American enterprises somewhere in 18th century, where the doors of the large scale economy was opened and companies wanted to market their goods traveling across kilometers. They would like to understand what is the cost for pricing that product at faraway markets. This is where it started coming up, the need for a cost information. That was followed very closely by the industrial engineers like my friend Gary Kokins getting into the topic and connected how we can improve the industrial productivity and connect it with the costing information. This is where operational excellence as a target started coming as early as 19th century or 18th century. And that is where schemes like Gantt task and bonus scheme or Priestman's production bonus scheme, where you find costing information inextricably linked with operational excellence being used for improving a firm's competitiveness. Followed by once the global enterprises started emerging in USA, where multiple locations like automobile industries, General Motors, they started coming up. We wanted to have a costing information for controlling the multidivisional enterprises, and that is where subjects like performance budgeting, etc., came. Now the key change is only the black box and the orange box, what you see subsequently. So this is all fine, but what happened once the Cold War started and there was a huge devastation globally? There was a huge pressure for economies which were devastated during the World War time, how to ensure the supply of goods and services at an affordable price for the common man. So this objective was rampant, whether it is Japan, whether it is France, whether it is Italy, or everywhere, the need for costing information to ensure an affordable pricing of goods and services. That was the preoccupation of a post-war economy. And this is the context in which I would bring to the attention of the Honorable Governor that even economies like Japan started issuing cost accounting standards. Even till date, they are valid. There are cost accounting standards issued by the Japanese Finance Ministry which are being used. There are cost accounting standards which have been issued, like for example, in Italy and France those days, to ensure a proper public supply of goods and services, by which they ascertained an average cost of a product of a common man, which has to be like a bread or anything like that, which has to be produced, and price it at an affordable level so that the common man is not impacted. So this black box, the evolution of cost accounting standards started coming, but the key objective was to support the affordable pricing. And then came the big change in the yellow box, what you see very nicely documented by Kaplan, that the whole cost accounting information became subservient to provide information for valuation of work in progress and finished goods, and hence became a subset of the financial accounting system. But last but not the least, the evolution came in terms of the once the globally companies started competing somewhere in the 1990s and towards the last century, the Japanese started invading the globally the economy and all things like that. The Americans started understanding that how the complexity is not being understood by the costing system. So complexity as a theme became into the managerial costing information, and that is what led to the new tools like activity-based costing. Now we had this plethora. So how did we fit this into our understanding of our economy? Next slide. So here we now need government strokes. We need to support the government in the form of a societal costing to ensure the affordable pricing by applying the best practices evolved in a post-World War economy, and how the cost accounting standards were used by government which was intervening into the economy. It was balancing the need of the society and at the same time ensuring the sustainability of the enterprises. So there was a clear-cut need of the societal cost accounting for the government strokes. As far as the firm level is concerned, they were now very, very keen on getting the managerial costing back up for their firm level competition, embrace the best practices world over, which are still evolving for a post-pandemic phase. Like, for example, how the artificial intelligence can be connected with the costing and pricing. All these things are all coming up right now. So this is how what we did. We very nicely connected these two into a two partition, but not very tightly separated. The government is interested in a societal costing from a common man angle, and the enterprises in Sri Lanka would be keen on managerial costing for competing globally. So next slide. So keeping this in mind, we created two peaks, one stream which speaks about managerial costing and another stream which speaks about societal costing. So in the framework which has been issued, the managerial costing part will consist of these parts: principles, concepts, how does that interface with the societal framework, and lastly, management accounting tools which need to be now gradually introduced into the Sri Lankan economy, guided by the principles and the concepts what we need to practice. So I am not going to take you through all of them elaborately, but explain only one or two to give you a flavor of what has been in our mind and embedded into the draft. Next slide. So if you take the case of the principles, I am going to explain to you only one, in that you find the fourth bullet, analogy. Analogy as an organizational behavior or a human behavior should look for patterns, the logic, the significance of variation, how one factor moves with another factor. So that sort of pattern understanding and applying that pattern understanding, which is called as an analogous thinking to a new environment to take a decision, is a fundamental principle of a human and organizational behavior. So analogical thinking is a very, very important requirement for enterprises. The last one is sustainability. So sustainability today, Sri Lankan enterprises are racing towards in their sustainability reporting maturity as well as integrated reporting maturity. And sustainable business practices are being embedded as a part of the organization's business model. But how does, to what extent the decision-making structures in terms of the cost figures are married with the value figures, that is the key area where we can do a lot of work. So sustainability as a principle and analogy as another principle, I wanted to explain to you as to how we are going to drive these principles through this framework. Next slide. So under the principles, we can now start practicing concepts. Principles are overarching, and under the principles, you have got various concepts which can be practiced, but concepts can change over time. I will explain again only one or two concepts. If you look, for example, the value chain or a value creation, the Sri Lankan enterprises, it's very important for them to not look at the cost structure within the entity. Primarily, the cost structure influence comes from the extended value chain, either by the supplier or by the dealer, and the companies can get squeezed in a value chain without understanding what is really happening. So a value chain thinking is very, very important, because the cost information can be not lying inside an entity, but it can lie outside an entity, and we need to understand those drivers. So the concept of value chain thinking coming from external to the entity is very, very important for the firms to attain a managerial maturity in the costing model. The last one is a data integration. These are the days of the data integration. We cannot look for data at multiple sources. It's very important when a company plans its ERP or a customer interaction intelligence, all of them should get connected. In fact, the connected business strategy is the latest theme, which is creating waves globally as to how we connect all the functions of an organization with the business strategy. So these are some of the important concepts which are coming under the principles, which the Sri Lankan enterprises need to practice, and these concepts should get reflected in the management or the managerial costing tools. So next slide. So what do we propose to do? Under these principles and concepts, we are now going to issue a host of managerial guidelines, managerial costing guidelines. We are not going to jettison the traditional cost accounting approach. That may be relevant for some companies. How to do the cost, the quality of a product, how to apply activity-based costing in decision making, how to look at Kaizen or improvements or eliminating waste in an operational environment and look at cost as an important information for eliminating waste, how to practice target costing when globally the prices are set and it is not cost plus profit is equal to price, but price minus profit is equal to cost. So that is where you target the cost. And last but not the least, there's something called should costing, which is today becoming very, very important for those companies which have got a very heavy extended supply chain and they cannot accept the prices demanded by the suppliers, but you do the costing internally through a clean sheet engineering approach. This is what a product component or a source raw material or a source product should cost us before we buy that materials for us for our value addition. So this is not a exhaustive list, but the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board with the Technical Advisory Committee will be looking for lots of cost and management accounting tools which will be issued to practice the concepts which I just now said and the overall arcing governing principles of the managerial costing. So now I move to the last part of the societal costing. Next slide. So again, the societal costing framework has got principles, it has got concepts, and it has got tools. In terms of principles, I am going to touch only one important principle which will come in the societal costing, which you might have noticed was not there in the managerial costing, which is the public interest. So when I am going to cost and price a water, or when I am going to cost and price, let us say, a public utility in terms of a railway pricing, or I am going to cost bread, wherever there is a public interest involved, that becomes a very important governing principle across the nation, whichever enterprises are producing those goods. For them, the cost information cannot be separated from the public interest. And that too, that cost information will have to be traceable when you need to understand what really is driving the cost of that particular product. So public interest and traceability of cost are two important principles which will be there in the societal costing, whereas it will not have that much of alarming level of importance in the managerial costing. Next slide, please. So to implement these ideas, if you now can see the concepts in the case of societal costing, it is more in line with not the value chain, but against that. It is an entity specific. A typical firm cannot add the cost of producing something which comes from outside its value chain and say this is a value chain cost. So a societal costing will have to be within the financial boundary of an organization, which is entity specific on a going concern concept, with lots of transparency of cost information built into what is called as a cost records. It cannot be, financial records alone cannot be produced to say this is where the cost information is there, but transparency in the cost records by maintaining a set of cost records which will provide traceability, consistency, comparability, and materiality for taking national level decisions by the government. These are some of the concepts which are embedded under the principles of the societal costing, which we think is going to be practiced with the following tools. Next slide. So how do we now propose to implement these concepts? The first of all, there is going to be a general purpose cost statement, which is a vanilla cost statement, which should be there in any company which is producing affordable, which is essential goods and services. What is the cost of producing that? That general purpose cost statement will have to be there. And what sort of cost accounting principles which have been adopted in the costing records will be brought out in the guidelines of the cost accounting. So the board will be bringing out with the guidelines on cost accounting, which will tell that these are the cost records which are leading towards the general purpose cost statements. Eventually, it will be perfected with cost accounting standards. And as far as the government is concerned, how to apply all this information in a social cost benefit analysis when they take decisions of subsidy. These are the aspects which will come as a tools in the societal costing part framework of the organization. So of the framework. So once we have this, what next? So this is the next thinking. Next slide, please. So with this framework, the visionary pathway has been created for the board. We will first, after issuance of this managerial costing framework, the board will start issuing managerial costing guidelines and engage upon national competency development programs on managerial costing adoption and application. As far as the societal costing is concerned, issuance of exposure drafts on cost accounting standards and approval of the same and what cost records need to be maintained will have to be developed over a period of time. And we would also plead that a mechanism for ensuring the compliance of cost accounting standards through a regulatory body's intervention of essential goods and services like water, electricity, etc. can be made so that the firms producing that or the government departments producing that can maintain cost records based on these principles and standards and concepts and participate in the progress towards the sustainable development goals. This is the overall ambition and the visionary roadmap we have created. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raman, for the value you have created today. You've given us much data, which we will now begin to integrate into our processes, perhaps employing analogous thinking. As Mr. Raman observed, however, all this must be firmly based in reality. So we are grateful to have with us today one who can share with us the state of the nation, grounded by the realities of serving the public while balancing competing interests and the true cost of ensuring continuity, reliability, and sustainability. Our chief guest is the 16th governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, with effect from September 2021, prior to which he was the State Minister of Money and Capital Market and State Enterprise Reforms. He has now been elevated, as we heard, to the rank of a cabinet minister in his new post. The Honorable Governor was also the 12th governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and served during that time as alternate governor of the International Monetary Fund, the chairman of the Southeast Asian Central Bank's Board of Governors, and chairman of the SAARC Central Bank Governors Forum. He served also as senior advisor to the Prime Minister on economic affairs in 2019 and 2022. And as we heard from Professor Watawala, he is a chartered accountant profession, as well as being one of the youngest chartered accountants to qualify in Sri Lanka at that time. He has served as the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka and the South Asian Federation of Accountants. He was recently appointed as an honorable patron of CMA Sri Lanka by the Governing Council and is a founder and fellow member of CMA Sri Lanka. As an Eisenhower Fellow in the year 2000 Multi-Nation Program, the Honorable Governor of the Central Bank is the author of several books. He's a voracious reader, an eloquent speaker, and a person with unique experiences and insights, some of which we will now discover. So we are very pleased to invite you, our chief guest, the Honorable Governor of the Central Bank, Ajith Niwad Cabral, to address the audience now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's indeed an honor and a privilege to be with you this evening, especially at the invitation of my friend, Mr. Lakshman R. Watawala, with whom I have had very close connections and as well as career spanning more than 40 years. So I want to say thank you to Lakshman for the interest that you have taken in furthering the profession in our country, and your leadership in various capacities has been an extremely useful guide to taking our country forward in the accounting, managerial, as well as the costing spheres. So whilst thanking you and congratulating the Cost and Management Accounting Institution, I also want to say that I'm privileged to be at this occasion where you are launching the managerial and societal costing framework, which can be used for the future. It's indeed important for us to recognize and realize that these building blocks must be in place in a country. We all know that costing, as well as being guided by the costs involved, is quite a complex matter, but at the same time very important if we are to ensure that we will be able to go forward with clarity and with confidence. I was listening to Honorable Raman, who made an extremely useful presentation with regard to the ways in which this discipline should be nurtured, created, and disseminated. I think that's very important that we all promote these concepts as well as the delivery of these concepts to be applied in practical situations so that we can all benefit by these practices. As you know, the government is also grappling with various issues with regard to costing as well as delivery of various services and products to the people. Very often, the government is accused of not being sensitive to costs. Sometimes we got to understand that although there may be instances of government selling at below cost, which is unthinkable as far as the private sector is concerned, there are instances where the governments need to practice that kind of a philosophy in order to deliver various products and services to people at a reasonable price. Of course, it creates various distortions, and that's something that we need to guard against. But even with those distortions, at certain instances, particularly in times of turmoil, as well as in times of difficulties, those need to be also allowed to function, because otherwise the political fallout could sometimes be too much for a society to bear. So these are the challenges. But even so, even if we are to provide a particular service or a product at a price which is below cost, we should be aware as to what that cost is. That is why your own practices will be extremely useful in giving the government that information network that will allow it to be conscious of what costs are about. We do talk about society nets, safety nets, and social safety nets also have a cost. It's sometimes helpful if you understand what is the cost of providing certain safety nets to people. What is the opportunity cost of providing that? So that every single person is aware as to what these are about. Sometimes in our country, we provide services which are considered to be free to the people. Education is free. Health is free. Yes, it is free to the recipient. But what is the cost to society? How much does it cost to have a doctor in place? How much does it cost to have an accident victim to be brought back to proper state? Now, these are often not computed. These are often not considered in the context of overall governmental costing systems. We have a bulk cost, and we don't know what exactly has been the cost of providing each and every service or every product. So these can be addressed by the practices that you are promoting today. These can be costed out by your concepts as well as your practices that you are promoting through your managerial and societal costing framework. If we have that kind of information, that will be helpful for the government to understand and also communicate to the people as to what is the actual cost of the benefit that the government is providing to various people. Sometimes transport costs are subsidized. Sometimes fertilizer cost is subsidized. Sometimes education, sometimes health, sometimes other services like petroleum, or even gas, or coal, or electricity. These are often providing massive challenges to governments in delivery. So if the government understands what exactly is the price or the cost of such services, and that is understood by the people, that alone will be a very important communication, which can sometimes be helpful in guiding policies for the future. So I think there is a great role to play by your institute. There's a great role to play by the standards that you are going to set. And I'm happy that chartered accountants, cost and management accountants, as well as those who are qualified in the professional field of accounting, are taking the initiative and the leadership in order to provide that service to the society. So I wish you well. I believe that you are on the path to provide some very effective and useful guidance to the people of the world so that they could benefit by knowing what each and every service, what each and every component, what each and every activity is costing. So I hope that with your guidance, you will also be able to provide support to the government, our own government, at the same time, governments all over the world, as well as firms. Professor Raman spoke about the different firms that can also benefit by this kind of practice. So I hope these will be embraced by many so that we can use it as a tool in order to go forward with clarity and with confidence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Governor. I think we must especially thank you for the great address that you made and also the personal remarks you made with me, about me. So I'm sure that the very encouraging remarks that you made about this, I think this one, yeah, the encouraging remarks that you made will really give a big boost to our Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, and I'm sure the government, the private sector, and everyone will make use of what we are doing in order to benefit not only the business sector, but also the society at large. Thank you very much, Governor, and we wish you all the very best in your new post, and we are very proud of you because we know that you are flying the flag of the accountancy profession, both as a chartered accountant, as a management accountant, and now in the leadership role. And we wish you all the very best, and we are confident that you will be able to drive the economy and take us out of these difficult challenges that we are facing. And we will give you the fullest support in achieving this task. Thank you, and we wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much, Lakshman, and I wish your conference all success. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, and our appreciation to the Honorable Governor for underscoring the value of the framework and the role it can play, and of course, for your words of encouragement. Highlighting the global nature of today's initiative, our special guest of honor is the President of the South Asian Federation of Accountants. We invite him now to deliver the special guest of honor's address, Mr. AKM Delwar Hussain.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Delwar Hussain, President SAFA. First of all, I apologize for not timely entered the Zoom meeting. Honorable Chief Guest, today's our respected Governor of Bangladesh, Sri Lankan Central Bank, Mr. Cabral, and distinguished President of the Sri Lankan Cost and Management Accounting Standard Board, our very respected, our guardian of the accounting profession, Mr. Watawala sir, and other distinguished council member of the Sri Lankan Institute of Cost and Management Accounting Sri Lanka, and other distinguished dignitaries, and one of the legend, our respected cost accounting profession, A.N. Roman. He was my very close senior friend. I have great respect on him. His deliberation was excellent. Actually, I was extremely busy for a lot of important work in the countries in Bangladesh context. Now you will be happy to know that Bangladesh Security and Exchange Commission set up a capital market stabilization fund. I am one of the board of governance member. That's why I was extremely busy, because it is a new organization. So for that reason, I could not prepare properly, enter into the program. I convey my highest regards and respect, particularly Watawala sir and his team, for giving the opportunity to join such a wonderful program, which hosted by Institute of Cost and Management Accountant of Sri Lanka, but that is Chartered Management of Sri Lankan Institute. So I'll not take much time. Just I should say, just Watawala sir always should be memorable, all of the accounting profession in South Asian region, because of his predominant activities. Actually, it's a new thing. That is, he's established another cost and management accounting institute in Sri Lanka. It is a new setup, new standard organization that is launching ceremony of the Sri Lankan cost and management accounting standard and board exposure draft on the managerial and societal costing institute. So really, I'm happy, and as a SAFA president, it's a great honor. My tenure as Watawala sir and his team established a new organization that is, which is cost and management accounting standard, which will certainly add value for our accounting profession. Cost and management standard, it should achieve some goals. Financial market all over the world contributes to the economy by providing long-term finance to the industries and infrastructure, which is essential for their growth. Such financing assists in the industrialization, boosting of production, generating scope of employment, and facilitates foreign currency earning. Capital market around the world involves risk. No nation are exception from this. Investor in this market need to learn how to make a risk-adjusted return, but we all have to follow a get better to the best. Standard is to provide better guidelines on the standard cost accounting practices. Standard is to assist cost and management accountants in the preparation of uniform cost statements. It is to provide guidelines to bring standard approach towards the maintenance of cost and management accounting records under various statutes. It is to assist the management to follow the standard cost accounting practice in the manner of compliance with statutory obligation, and it is also to help industries and the government towards the better cost and management. And you know, the coronavirus has caused a widespread concern and economic hardship for consumer, businessmen, and communities across the globe. The situation is changing quickly with widespread impact. The confront this every crucial steps taking various professionals are significant. They are professional in this region. The member bodies have already introduced various standards like the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Bangladesh issues Financial Accounting and Auditing Standard. The Institute of Company Secretarial Practice issues the secretarial standards. Institute of Cost Accountant Bangladesh issues Cost Accounting and Auditing Standard. The Institute of Cost Accountants of India has assigned the topmost priority issuing the required cost account standard. They are prepared consultation with the stakeholders. Lot of things done by our SAFA bodies, each and every accounting profession. So I don't take more time. At the end, I would like to thank CMA Sri Lanka for inviting me and share my feelings. Again, I convey my highest regards to the respected, our guardian of the accounting profession in the South Asian region, Watawala sir, for giving the invitation by chance to say something at such a big gathering, particularly in Sri Lankan government bank, central bank, Cabral sir. I know him. I have met many times with him for various SAFA programs in Sri Lanka, and also Raman sir. So I finally I convey my highest regards all of the participants and distinguished guests. I pray all of you for good health and happiness. Please pray for me. Thank you again for giving patient hearing. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Delva Hussain. I think appreciate very much your presence. I know that you are having difficulty and that you have so much of work, but let me also congratulate you on you being appointing to the board of the Capital Market and Finance Board in Bangladesh. I think they have really appreciated the great work you have done, and I wish you all the very best. And maybe we will meet at the next SAPA board. Thank you and all the best.
Thank you, Professor. And we are so grateful to you, Mr. Delwar Hussain, for your kind remarks, for making time to be with us today, and for outlining what the framework can hope to achieve.
Thank you.
Now, another with a long and valued association with CMA Sri Lanka, our guest of honor, Professor Ho Yu Ki, is the Associate Provost of Skills and Future Development at the Singapore Institute of Technology and former professor in accounting of the National University of Singapore, as well as being, of course, a member of the CMA Advisory Council. We hear from him now with the guest of honor address. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me put up my screen. Good evening, Professor Lakshman Watawala, Founder, President, CMA Sri Lanka, Mr. Mahendra Jayasekara, Chairman, CMA Sri Lanka Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, Honorable Ajif Navev Kabara, Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Mr. AKM Delwar Hussain, President, South Asian Federation of Accountants, SAFA, special guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation to share a few words on the CMA Sri Lanka launch of Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, Managerial and Societal Costing Framework. Allow me to bring you back to time memorial using the illustration of a timekeeper versus a clock builder. When I went to accountancy school in the 1980s, one of the major accounting knowledge we had to learn was the conceptual framework for financial reporting. Those were the early years or early days of the International Accounting Standards, or now rightfully known as the International Financial Reporting Standard, IFRS. Little did we know then that we were dealing with exposure drafts on the key conceptual framework in financial reporting, which will subsequently become the cornerstone or the foundation of all financial reporting standards. Fast forward the next 35 years, up to 2021. You see, this is a classic example that we can choose to be the best accountant or timekeeper of our time, or we can choose to be a clock builder, which will build an infrastructure or a clock which allows us to tell time. Tonight, we're actually standing on the threshold of history, as many years from now, I believe there will be a generation of accountants whose work will draw their inspiration and foundation from what we are launching this evening. We become the clock builder rather than the timekeeper. You see, this is a most urgent time to launch a framework for managerial and societal costing because of the significant development that's taking places all around us, particularly in the creation and the accumulation of data. Statistica reported that the volume of data created worldwide since 2010 till 2025 would have grown at an annual compounded rate of 35%. Back in 2010, the data volume was only 2 zettabytes, and by 2025, it will likely reach 181 zettabytes. 1 zettabyte is 1 times 10 to the power of 21. In other words, it's 1 with 21 zero number of bytes as it is. You see, this data and its growth at an exponential rate have 4 key attributes in which we will tease out the value. And this becomes a major playing field for the accountants. The data will be voluminous, huge in volume, and the accumulation will have high velocity, right? And there is a great variety as the data will come in different shape, different form, and different size. And finally, the data is of different purity or degree of purity or veracity. There will be garbage or lies or half-truth or incompleteness in this data. You see, in the midst of all these data, the accountant will have to tease out the value and arrange them into information useful and fit for decision making. The launch of the managerial and societal costing framework is a small but significant step towards providing a set of principles and concepts for the handling of managerial and societal costing. And this is meant to tackle current and future emerging issues. You see, this framework will also be useful for the purpose of arrangement, sorting, and the disclosure of data for decision making. This is a necessary primer for setting standards and guidelines which will help decision making, particularly in this age of the proliferation of data. I applaud the Sri Lanka Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board for this excellent development. This is definitely a step in the right direction. You see, with this, I want to wish you all success as you take a first step in building the clock for cost and managerial accountants, which will become a giant leap for the Sri Lanka businesses and society. Thank you very much for having me. I deeply appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
And thank you, Professor Ho, for helping us visualize the magnitude of the challenges ahead, as well as the role of the framework in your own very inimitable style. We are going to hear more on that framework now from Mr. Tirel Roche, who is a member of the CMA Sri Lanka Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, as well as being the General Manager of Finance for Lanka Tiles PLC. So he will be giving us a detailed introduction to the framework. Mr. Roche, if you please.
Right, thank you very much. And honorable guests, of course, I can't see the governor, I think he has left. Distinguished members and invitees, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. My job today has been made easy by the presentations made before me by the respective speakers, starting from the president and the chairman and Mr. Raman and Professor Hu. So what I'm trying to do is to explain to you the product. Now we have discussed the concept, the theories. We have come up with a product that is the exposure draft that we will send to all intellectuals, all the qualified members and the relevant parties in Sri Lanka. So I will share my screen. Hope you can see the screen. So this is the product or the exposure draft that we will be sending to all members and as per the council protocols. So if I may go through very quickly on this exposure draft, there are four main parts. The first part will be the introduction part. This gives what and why is this framework. So we have Mr. Raman explained how the frameworks evolved. Professor Hu also said how the frameworks came about. So in the introduction, I am not going to describe in detail, but what is more important? The framework is a constituent of principles and concepts. It is used to make standards. So let's say if you have an issue and if you want to interpret a standard, you have to go to the framework. That is the theory behind the framework. So the entire background and the introduction is on this. What is this framework? So this is not the framework is not standard. The framework is to build the standard and it gives the boundary in which the standard is built upon. So that is mainly what we have to say. The stakeholders are, of course, the creators of the framework, that is CMA, the accounting bodies, the regulators, the government, the citizens, all are stakeholders. So the speakers before me highlighted that. So you can see from that how important is this framework. The objective of the frameworks are many, but mainly it is to prepare cost and management accounting standards. That is the main objective. By achieving that objective, you get better pricing, sustainable value creation, better cost information to make decisions internally and externally. But the main objective is to give a correct standards preparing method. Then we go to then this document structure we have given. Mainly we have the introduction first, then we have the management accounting standards, then we have societal costing standards, then how the standards are issued. And we have a small part which the framework concludes. But the main items are 4 main items. So the introduction of the first part, managerial costing will be the second part. In managerial costing,
and was the first woman to do so today.
In managerial costing, we look at how managerial accounting and managerial costing are done. Managerial accounting looks at the broader picture of decision making. Managerial costing is how you cost your products and services or your processes to get to that management account decision making. So for that, we have the framework of managerial costing. What are the principles and concepts? That is what the framework is. What are the principles and the concepts and how they apply to get these standards. So then the principle, of course, Mr. Raman highlighted 2 principles. We have given 6 here. So since I won't go to explain everything, but I will explain one, like causality, because for everything there must be a cause and effect. On that basis only we prepare the management accounting standards. So we have 6 principles highlighted here: causality, traceability, relevance, analogy, impactful thinking, and sustainability. So these are the things. When you get the exposure draft, you have to go through this and think on these principles. And when a standard is issued, it will be based on this principle. And if you want to interpret a standard, you have to interpret on these principles. Then we go on to concepts. Mr. Raman explained few of them. So we have concepts on value chain thinking and value creation, value proposition, resources and managerial objective, process orientation, and of course, one I want to explain is consistency. That is another benefit that you'll get by having standards where you can explore and you can compare costs, and we can get data in a consistent manner between industries, between firms for good firm level and government level decision making. And it gives a strategic and operational level classification as well. It gives a good interface with our next section, which is the societal costing framework. So the third main section, before that, there are the costing and management accounting tools that, of course, all of you all know the costing methods, then the management accounting tools. These will be given as guidelines for you, and it will be available after the exposure draft is given, after we develop the guidelines by the board on a separate document and a website for you to use and get your operations going while the standards are issued. Then, of course, benefits I don't have to elaborate. It gives good information, good decision making, cause and effect linkages. So it gives you better pricing and, of course, better understanding of how cost is behaving in company. So it is different from financial accounting. We are looking at the cost accounting side of the business, which we are not looking at a detailed manner right now. So this framework plus the standards and the guidelines will help you immensely in closing that gap in the Sri Lankan economy. The users will be, of course, the enterprises, the government bodies, regulators, accountants, researchers, academic, and even the intellectuals. Then we go to part 3, which is societal costing. So societal costing, what is it? It is the cost that we do in the public interest, the services of goods, services of public goods and service, power, transport, the cost of pollution, cost of where you don't cost it in your product, but there is a cost to the society. So that is social costing. So that is why this framework is developed. How do you establish that social costing? And it gives a standardization of costing in that goods or services or compare it with other products and services. So the main framework here also, there you have the principles, the concepts, and the general purpose cost statement and how it is issued. So what are the main principles? Again, Mr. Raman explained some of them. So we have sustainability, conservativeness, externality, public interest, traceability are the main 5 concepts we have highlighted here. So I want to highlight externality. So as management accountants, we look at only the firm level. What is the cost to the firm and what are the costs to the group and things like that. But by societal costing, you look at the external cost, how it impacts by producing a product. Is there is pollution? Is there is a resource degradation? Is there erosion? What is the cost of that? So who is going to pay for this? What is the firm going to do with this? Those are the things that we want to bring about. Then the concepts of entry specific, adhering to going concern, assumption, transparency, traceability, consistency, comparability, materiality, and standardization. So here the main item I want to highlight is the entry specific social cost. So as an industrial person, I said now looked only what the cost for the companies. So we have to see not only internally for our companies, what are the societal costs that we have? What are the social costs that we have? Are we using resources more than necessary? Is there erosion? Is there pollution? Things like that. So those kind of concepts are built because of this framework, and then it will be inbuilt for the standards issuance. Then we have a general purpose cost statement given to you. Of course, this will be further refined. You can give your inputs, a very usable document. Then how it is, what are the guidelines? So the guidelines will be given separately and it will be available in a booklet and a website. The users here again will be enterprises, the government, the regulators, researchers, and donor agencies like the IFC, World Bank can use this, and they can make specific decisions on what we are going to do. And the benefits is, of course, pricing of public utility service, looking at the impact of pollution, what is the cost of pollution, the cost of health, wildlife, environment because of manufacturing of services and goods, and of course CSR. Many firms want to do CSR on a sustainable manner, but this will help you to cost and see what is the impact. And finally, the last main chapter will be the cost account. How are we going to issue the standards? So the process is the CMA SB will take a topic of interest. So they research from other countries and look at the Sri Lankan context, select a topic. Then they will take a task force for it, get a task force to do the standard. Then a draft standard with all these introduction, objective, scope, and these 8 areas will be taken with the application guide. Then exposure draft will be prepared and sent out for feedback. Then when all this exposure draft and the feedback is given, it is converted into a standard and then it's given to the CMA Council for approval. By virtue of its legal powers and the act that is established, the CMA will issue the standard on a date specified and decided by the council. So that is the standard issuing process. So first we do the framework, then we go to guidelines. After that we start standards. So there will be about 20 to 24 standards that's coming in for Sri Lanka. So it's a process that will take time. So then the framework is concluded by a passage of how all this document was done, but that is not a major part. So that is the entirety of the framework, and thank you for listening. That is the introduction. Hopefully when all of you get this framework, we expect you to give us feedback. There is a questionnaire, of course. If you don't want to do the questionnaire and give feedback separately, you can write it to us. We'll take it, and that is what you all have to do, and that is what you have to take from this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks to Mr. Roche for showing us in detail how the framework will underpin the standards, and also for giving us a deeper insight into the elements that it comprises. For another perspective, now we turn to our guest of honor, who contributes his experience as former Vice President, Research and Executive in Residence, IMA USA, the Executive Director for Profitability Analytics Center of Excellence, or PACE USA, Dr. Rafe Lawson. We're delighted to have you here, and the stage, or rather the screen, is yours.
Great, thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you to Professor Walla for inviting me, and regards to all the other members of this distinguished panel. It's a pleasure to be here. And I've been asked to share some high-level thoughts on the relevance and importance of the development of this framework. I'm here today in a dual role. I am currently Executive Director of the Profitability Analytics Center of Excellence, but I also am currently chair of IMA's Research Foundation. So I'll be representing IMA here as well. So I wanted to look at this framework, talk about the framework in a broad context, and start by looking at the role of management accounting. Traditionally, management accounting has focused on collecting and reporting largely financial information and having stewardship over the organization's resources. That role is becoming increasingly unsustainable for our profession. We all know how technology is reshaping our profession, not just management accounting, but every aspect of the profession. And traditional roles performed by management accountants are being automated and face possible elimination. So this is combining with changing societal expectations. It's no longer sufficient to just collect and report financial information, but we're expected to take a broader societal view in our role in our organizations. So what is our role as management accountants? And I think there's a growing consensus that the role of management accountants is to add value to our organizations and the broader society in which we live. And how do we do that? We do that by using our unique combination of skills and our positions within our organizations that give us a holistic view of operations, again, to add value. And new skills are going to be required of management accountants, but that's not the subject of today's discussion. Well, how can we add value as management accountants to our organizations and society? We can help ensure that the acquisition of resources is aligned with our organization's mission, visions, and goals. And one nice thing about this framework is that expands its view from beyond the organization and looks at societies as a whole. So we need to make sure our societies, our countries, are efficiently deploying resources that we can muster. We also need to make sure there's effective deployment of those resources and that they're used effectively. Well, a prior speaker mentioned various accounting methodologies that we are all familiar with, I'm sure, that have been developed over the last 40 or 50 years. And it's actually led to confusion. You know, what are the appropriate accounting techniques to use in given circumstances? And that's where I think this framework comes in. Our profession needs to ground its practices on a robust set of principles. And this managerial and societal costing framework helps by providing a framework that helps delineate those principles that can help, that will be effective. This is an effort that's near and dear to my heart. While I was at IMA overseeing our research effort, we developed our own conceptual framework for managerial costing and issued 3 SMAs or statements on management accounting related to that. One thing that I'm very happy to see in this framework is the inclusion of the causality principle. I think it's key to any framework. It's key to the costing system that any organization or entity deploys. In building revenues, costing, and investment models, we need to include cost and effect relationships. This is a deficiency of the accounting systems that the majority, quite frankly, of organizations deploy today. And again, this is where inclusion of this principle and issuance of this framework can help advance costing practices. And this causality should be based on resources, operations, and processes first, and not money. And just as an example of how important this causality principle is, IMA has issued 3 major publications that were developed by ACE and published by IMA that mentions causality 41 times. So again, it's a fundamental keystone concept for management accounting systems. And at PACE, we've developed what we call our Profitably Analytics Framework. I won't go into the details here, but I also want just to reiterate that this principle is integrated throughout our framework. And again, to see it included in this conceptual framework is very encouraging. The first speaker today said something interesting, and again, it's I think a unique contribution of this conceptual framework is its inclusion, not only the impact of costing practices on entities, but on society as a whole. And again, the first speaker mentioned the need for costing standards to help ensure fair trade. And that's, a concern not only in Sri Lanka, but, when I first joined IMA, one of the first research studies I did was looking at the costing practices of Chinese companies, because there's a concern with regard to whether they were dumping their products in the United States. So, some things don't change, and again, having a costing framework could help address that issue. And a final comment is I'm very encouraged to see the inclusion of sustainability in this framework. It's a growing trend in management accounting. We need to not just focus on sustainability with regard to external financial reporting, but we need to learn and understand and implement sustainability into how we can help foster and integrate sustainability into the operations of the organization. We need to learn how to partner with others to make our companies and our societies more sustainable. So in summary, there's a lot of great things in this framework. Includes the principles of causality and analogy, which are critical in designing effective decision models. It reflects the growing importance of social and environmental issues to our companies. It helps give us a way of, as management accountants, of addressing those. And it can finally help serve as guidance for governmental policy with regard to the pricings of goods and services. So there's a lot of benefit that development of this framework can yield. So thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel today. It's been a pleasure listening to the other speakers, and I wish you the best of luck going forward.
And thank you for sharing, Dr. Lawson, and outlining with such clarity where the framework will help and its relevance in addressing current areas of focus for IMA and PACE, and of course, for the business world as a whole. So we really appreciate your remarks and thank you for making the time to be here. Thank you. Thank you so much. We get yet another perspective now from our next guest of honor, Mr. Gary Calkins, who is an international speaker and an author in advanced cost management and performance improvement systems. He's the founder of analytics-based performance management in the USA. So Mr. Gary Calkins, we'd love to hear your perspectives. Thank you.
Well, thanks you very much for inviting me to present and also previously having me be a fellow at the ICMA. As Lakshman mentioned, I've done, I think, 7 webinars starting last December for the ICMA. So if people want to dig a little deeper in some of the concepts I'm going to describe. I'm not going to use any slides. In fact, I'm probably going to be a little provocative here because I'm going to introduce some criticism. But before I do, I want to thank Rafe for introducing PACE. I'm going to give a little bit of background on PACE because because I'm one of the 3 directors where Rafe is the executive director. But I want to share what the origin of PACE was, because it was the 4 of us 2-3 years ago really being frustrated with the slow adoption rate of progressive managerial methods. Now, briefly about myself, many of you recognize me, but real quick, I'm 72. I feel like I'm 42. My undergraduate was at Cornell University, Industrial Engineering and Operations Research, and I got my MBA at Northwestern University, Kellogg. My many years were with Deloitte, KPMG, and SAS, the large analytics software vendor. But I always like to say I'm an engineer masquerading as an accountant, because to me, management accounting is not external statutory reporting for government regulators. It's internal information to facilitate managers to have more insights, better insights, to make better decisions. Now I'll start with some of the criticism, both in Sri Lanka, India, and even in the APAC, the Asian Pacific area. Too much emphasis on external reporting. It's an imbalance. We need to swing it back to management accounting, because to me, external reporting is about valuation, inventory value for a manufacturer, cost of goods sold for a manufacturer. Management accounting is creating value by providing the information that managers, executives, employee teams can make better decisions. Now, the frustration, what's taking so long? I was very lucky. I was trained by Professor Robert S. Kaplan of Harvard in 1988. He came to KPMG, contracted. I got taught by him. I wrote books on ABC subsequently. I thought this is going to take off like a rocket. That's in like the 1980s. Still, probably 95% of organizations that should be applying ABC continue to spread the butter when they trace those indirect expenses without violating the causality principle. And I'm glad that Rafe brought that up. Costing is modeling. Costing is not T accounts and journal entries. It's not, the expenses in the general ledger are reassigned through the processes, the activities belong to them, and eventually traced to the products, services, channels, customers, and the like. So rules are many, principles are few. Principle like speed of light, gravity. You can't violate gravity and speed of light, but the accountants violate it when they allocate overhead or indirect expense, violating the causality principle. So now, what's with the frustration? How do we basically get CFOs in the accounting community into the 21st century? Well, there are barriers. Some of the barriers are fear of knowing the truth, or others knowing the truth. They don't want to use a better method because they don't want people to get some visibility and transparency. Some of it is employees having fear of being held accountable, fear of being measured. Some of it's weak leadership. Some of the executives at the top basically don't have the desire or the will to be innovative and experimental. Notice those methods have nothing to do with software, nothing to do with technology, nothing to do with systems. It's all about people. So my message really here is for you to really adopt the principles. And I really like this guide, and of course, environmental and social. You know, I have grandsons. I don't want their children to basically be suffering from climate change. So all the things you got in there, great stuff. But how do we basically get buy-in? Now comes a different conflict. There's two schools of thought of how do you get to persuade buy-in. One is the carrot, one is the stick. What I mean by that, the carrot is advocates that say, you got to basically motivate the CFOs to serve their managers better, to serve their executive team, provide them better information. That's the carrot. Be persuasive. The stick is, hey, they've had 30 years to do this. Let's shame them. Let's tell them they're irresponsible. Let's tell them they're doing a bad job, you know, that they're underserving their managers. You can pick which side you want to be on. But regardless, whether it's a carrot or the stick, or maybe some sort of blend, because sometimes you have to tailor it based on the personalities of who you're trying to basically motivate to move. I'm just saying change management is a skill we're going to have to acquire. Most of us don't have degrees in psychology and sociology. So I hope mine wasn't the depressing presentation during this 2.5 hours, but it was sort of, there's a lesson there that if you want to become progressive, you're going to have to figure out how to persuade others to basically be progressive. And you're welcome to invite me in LinkedIn, Gary Kokens. My email address is gkokens@garykokens.com. Thank you, Lakshman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kokens. That was a very incisive look at how to get multiple stakeholders involved, and we're very appreciative of the passion that you bring to the endeavor. So definitely not that controversial a statement, as you said. We continue now with the program as planned. So we have several guests of honor joining us, as we've seen today, and a few have agreed very kindly to address remarks on this memorable occasion. So we have next up Mr. Biswar Basu, who is the president of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India. So thank you, sir, for being here, and we would love to hear from you now. It appears that Mr. Basu has temporarily dropped off the call, given the nature of the technological challenges that we're faced with. So we'd like to invite Mr. Manil Jayasinghe, the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, to speak, if he will.
Thank you. First of all, let me, I know the governor is not there, Governor of the Central Bank, Mr. Ajit Niwat Cabral, President of CMA, Professor Lakshman Vatawala, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to begin by congratulating CMA Sri Lanka for launching this managerial and societal costing framework, which I think was need of the hour, since we don't seem to have anything of this nature in the management accounting costing field. I think as Professor Corkin also mentioned, in the financial reporting space, there is a lot of development in this, where there is a framework, where there are standards, and emphasized on the grounds that there is too much emphasis on external reporting as opposed to internal management-oriented information for better decision making, in my view. So, in that context, I think CMA should be congratulated for developing this framework and taking that first step to issue it to the public, so that companies, businesses, organizations can start using this. But as this is a framework, as I think some speakers before mentioned, the framework actually gives the foundation, if you want to call it that, for the standard setters to start developing the standards. So it brings in a degree of consistency. It also brings in a degree of where the standard setters can use this framework in order to develop and build on standards which is required for better information accumulation and dissemination. So if you look at, I think COVID-19 pandemic has no doubt had a severe impact on both, let's say, the health sector and the economy. So timing of these events were unfortunate, especially as it came in the heels, at least in Sri Lanka, in the heels of another devastating, which was the Easter attacks. So amidst all these ongoing economic challenges, the public seems to be among the hardest hit. Amidst the escalating cost of living, and even today we can see, I think Sri Lanka was downgraded by Moody's again. So a lot of challenges. So as such, I think professional bodies, including CMA Sri Lanka and even CA Sri Lanka, have a crucial role to play in ensuring competitiveness, which will not only benefit business but also society by properly costing out the goods and then basically giving these goods to society at a reasonable price. I think, as the governor also quite rightly mentioned earlier, sometimes giving subsidies and all, it is something that society needs. But the issue here is, what is the cost of that? And then measuring that and then taking decisions as to whether the extent of that cost is justifiable in providing those subsidies is something that you can evaluate. Now today, since these are not measured, nor do we have any mechanism to measure these, there is no way of evaluating whether these actually have a benefit or not. So therefore, I must commend Professor Vatawala and the CMA Sri Lanka and the cost and management accounting board, standard board, for taking this lead and initiative in developing and launching this important framework. So importance of a framework is generally that you build that foundation, the building blocks, the foundation where you can develop the standards. And then standards are tools that are required for, say, for planning, budgeting, managing, cost controlling, and evaluating cost management and performance. So standards bring about a certain degree of consistency, comparability, capturing information or data that is required, so relevant, and also measuring this more reliably. So the standards help you to sort of identify, measure, reporting performance, giving the necessary information for decision making. So therefore, the framework lays the foundation for the standard setters to use for framing of these standards. So that's why it's important to first develop the framework and then get on with setting the standards, which I believe has been now done. So therefore, developing this framework is obviously a landmark initiative by CMA Sri Lanka, and launching this will also add value and boost our business landscape in Sri Lanka, as it will help businesses become more competitive in line with the principles and practices followed at an international level. So today you can see, because of the pandemic, the whole business landscape is changing. We are moving towards technology. Our value chains are changing. If you look at the way we deliver goods and services are changing. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of shifts that are taking place, and all these shifts will require consistent methods of measuring, identifying, measuring, accumulating, and reporting. Reporting means not for external reporting. This is for information that is necessary for better decision making. Is the key here. Therefore, finally, I would like to say we should consider this as a new beginning, and as members belonging to this prestigious accounting profession, we can continue to play a catalyst role in not just strengthening our profession, but also we must look at positively contributing to our country and thereby the society. So I wish the CMA and Professor all the success in this new endeavor. It is a foundation, no doubt, But I'm sure from once the foundation is done, the rest of it will follow pretty fast. So thank you very much, and all the very best to CMA.
Thank you so much to Mr. Jayasinghe for clarifying further what this framework means in the local context, as well as the hopes for its future. Now, in an endeavor of this scale, there are many who have contributed valuable time and effort, and indeed, we've seen some of them here today. And that appreciation that must be their due will be expressed shortly. But before that, because this is a commemorative occasion, there's a quick housekeeping announcement. We'd like to request that the panelists do stay on the webinar, because we'd like to take a photograph or a screenshot, as it were, to mark the occasion. But now, without further ado, we'd like to invite to express that appreciation that we were talking about, a gentleman who holds the dual role of Vice President of CMA Sri Lanka and Vice President of SAFA, but it is as part of CMA Sri Lanka that he will do what is commonly known as the vote of thanks. So we invite now Mr. Hennayaka Bandara for the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dinesha. Our chief guest, Honorable Ajit Niwad Kabral, Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Special guest of honor, Mr. Dello Hussain, President, South Asian Federation of Accountants. Our President, Professor Lakshman Vatavela. Mr. Mahendra Jayasekara, Chairman, CMA Sri Lanka Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board. Keynote speaker, Mr. N. Raman. All of the valued speakers, President of SAFA member bodies, members of the Council, distinguished invitees, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me an immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks to appreciate the valuable contribution made by eminent professionals and others towards a successful launching ceremony of CMA Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, Managerial and Societal Costing Framework. Our chief guest and President SAFA have logged out. Nevertheless, it is my duty to thank them. Honorable Governor, we are aware of the very tight schedule that you maintain, and despite such duties, for having consented to grace this occasion as the chief guest, we are very grateful to you. You have been a close friend of our institute, having graced functions and events organized by us in the past, and we are indeed fortunate to have you with us at this very important occasion. On behalf of CMA and the accountants profession, we greatly appreciate your participation. We look forward to your support in our future events as well. I also would like to thank our special guest of honor, Mr. Dello Hussain, President SAFA, for readily accepting our invitation and joining with us at this historic occasion. We greatly appreciate your support as the head of a regional body of the accounting fraternity. We look forward to your support in our future events. My special thanks to our President, Professor Lakshman Vatavela, for the initiatives taken to set up the CMA Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board and inviting an industry experts as its chairman and others as members of the board. More importantly, he was able to obtain the expertise from SAFA Cost and Management Accounting member bodies. He was optimistic, certain, and self-assured that the framework will be released as planned. I appreciate very much the valuable role played by him in his capacity as President CMA and also as a board member. Let me also thank Mr. Mahendra Jayasekara, Chairman CMA Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, for his dedication and dynamic leadership provided to board members and technical staff to accomplish the task. At the same time, I would like to recognize and appreciate the valuable contribution made by all board members, and more importantly, the technical team who extended their expertise and support to finalize the framework within a short period of time. We have been fortunate enough to be supported by a team of very motivated and dedicated professionals from various organizations who know their jobs and are result-oriented. It is very significant that we have today the keynote speaker, Mr. A.N. Raman. You have a close relationship with our institute in your capacity as one of the advisory council members and a close friend of our president. We deeply appreciate the guidance and technical advice provided by you from the inception in formulating the framework. We thank you for readily including our event in your itinerary and honoring us with your participation as the keynote speaker. Let me also thank our guest of honors, Professor O. A. Key, Associate Professor, Singapore Institute of Technology, Dr. Ref Lawson, former Vice President, Research and Executive in Residence, IMA USA, Mr. Gary, international speaker and author in Advanced Cost Management and Performance Improvement System, for your participation and sharing your expertise. We greatly appreciate your contribution. It is pertinent to mention that Mr. B.B. Goyal, former Chief Advisor Cost, Government of India, played an arduous task in developing the framework. Let me also thank Mr. Manil Jayasinghe, President, Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, for your participation and making congratulatory remarks at this important occasion. In fact, Mr. Manil is one of our council members as well. Let me also thank Mr. Tyrell Roach, a team player and hardworking professional, the General Manager of Finance, Lanka Tiles PLC, who involved in developing the framework for his technical and informative presentation to make all of you aware of the salient features. I also would like to appreciate the contribution made by our council members and staff of CMA for the support extended in organizing this event. Finally, I would like to thank members of the Institute, all distinguished invitees, for your participation and the enthusiasm shown to join in and for making this launching ceremony a grand success. Thank you. Stay safe and take care. Good night to all of you.
And thank you, Mr. Bandara. Now, before the photograph that we mentioned, we have one more voice to be heard. We are so glad that the president of the Institute of Cost and Management Accountants of Bangladesh was able to join us despite many commitments. Mr. Abu Bakr Siddiqui is here, and we would like to hear from him if we can prevail on him. Thank you.
I'm sorry for the late to join because I need to take my mother to the hospital for a surgery related issue. So it was very much important for me to maintain the schedule. So I am late in joining the program. But I hope the program was successfully completed, and I wish the success of this program and the inauguration of the draft of the managerial and societal costing. I think the cost and management accounting standard, CMA Sri Lanka decided to publish exposure draft will help the development of the cost and management accounting standard in the region and also in the world, because cost and management accounting standard is not so till today so much popular and not published by so many institute. Only Institute of Cost Accountants of India published few standard, and Institute of Cost and Management Account of Bangladesh also published few standards. Now CMA Sri Lanka included themselves with this process. I think with this initiative, the cost accounting standard will be further strengthened, and in a SAFA banner, I will request the president of the CMA Sri Lanka to take the initiative to make a uniform standard in the SAFA region for cost accounting standard, as the international accounting standard and international financial reporting IFRS. So I think in the SAFA forum we can discuss this issue to make a uniform cost and management accounting standard. With this few words, I like to thank the organizer of the program, and I hope the program will come as scheduled for the region, that will be successful. Thank you all. Allah Hafiz. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Abu Bakar Siddiqui. I think we are very grateful to you. Although you got a few minutes late, I know that you had to go for some urgent to take your mother and go. So we wish her well, and thank you very much for being present today.
Echoing Professor Watawala, of course, we are very grateful that in the face of personal challenges, you made that time. So we would like to now mark this occasion, and we would like to ask the panelists to please switch on their cameras so we can mark this moment with them. So if we can all take a moment just to switch on our cameras, that would be great. Thank you so much. Right, that is brilliant. Thank you so much. And to all our panelists, once again, our great appreciation.
I think Mr. Raman.
Mr.
Lakshman, I am under tremendous shoulder pain, Lakshman. I have switched off.
Okay, no problem.
I'm lying down, but I can't, I don't want to switch off the video.
No problem, no problem. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for being part of it, despite all the challenges that you have faced. We appreciate that. Now, to each of you joining us from elsewhere, thank you once again for being here as we make history. Now, as you've heard, it is one step in the journey, and we are very grateful that you are here with us for that, and we hope that you will be part of the longer journey as well. Echoing our Professor and our Vice President, please take care and stay safe. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lakshman. Thank you, Mahendra. It was a great event.
Thank you, Dinasha. Excellent comprehensive. Thanks, Professor. Thank you. We will meet soon. Okay, right. Thank you then. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Gary. Thank you very much. We hope we can have you sometime later. Maybe in the new year. Right. Okay, fine. Thank you. Bye.